Design and specifications. Length 11.2 meters, diameter 0.88 meters, weight launch 6,400 kilograms, warhead 985 kilograms, high explosive, fragmentation, or chemical payload possible. Range 2,300 kilometers, weight launch. Propulsion, single stage liquid-fueled rocket engine, guidance inertial navigation system ends, accuracy, circular error, probable SAP of 500 meters, not very precise by modern standards, can carry a relatively heavy warhead over short distances, best suited for targeting urban centers, military bases, or infrastructure, rather than precise. Liquid fuel makes preparation time longer, which reduces survivability against advanced adversaries. The Shahab-1 stands as a symbolic and practical cornerstone in the history of Iran's missile development. To understand its importance, one has to revisit the late stages of the Iran-Iraq War. At that time, Iran was under immense pressure. Iraqi forces, supplied heavily by the Soviet Union and other international backers, unleashed a series of missile strikes against Iranian cities using Scud-B missiles. These attacks, known as the War of the Cities, were devastating both physically and psychologically, inflicting civilian casualties and shaking Iran's internal stability. Iran had no comparable long-range strike system to respond in kind, which left the country strategically vulnerable. It was in this climate of necessity that the Shahab-1 emerged. Iran initially lacked the technological base to produce ballistic missiles. Its military was still largely dependent on pre-revolutionary Western-supplied systems, and after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, international sanctions severely restricted access to spare parts and advanced weaponry. Seeking to close this gap, Iran turned to North Korea, which had acquired and modified Soviet Scud-B missiles. Through this cooperation, Iran imported not only missiles but also technical knowledge and support for eventual local assembly. These imported systems were essentially Scud-BS, but became known within Iran's military program as Shahab-1, a name chosen to symbolize power and speed, as the word translates to meteor or shooting star. The foundational role of Shahab-1 extends beyond the battlefield utility it provided during the final years of the Iran-Iraq War. More importantly, it represented the first major step in Iran's long-term ambition to develop an independent and sustainable missile program. While the Shahab-1 itself was a foreign design with limited modifications, its presence allowed Iranian engineers and military planners to study, test, and gradually gain confidence in handling complex missile systems. Every launch, every maintenance cycle, and every attempt to adapt the missile to Iran's needs provided invaluable lessons. On the strategic level, the Shahab-1 provided Iran with something it had desperately lacked: a tool for deterrence, even though the missiles' accuracy was poor by modern standards, and its preparation time made it vulnerable compared to solid-fueled systems. The variability to strike enemy cities hundreds of kilometers away shifted the balance of psychological warfare. Iran could now answer Iraq's missile strikes with retaliatory attacks of its own. That shift was crucial, not just militarily but politically, reinforcing Iran's resilience in the face of international isolation. Over time, the Shahab-1 became less relevant in actual combat terms as more advanced systems like the Shahab-2, Shahab-3, and solid-fueled Fateh-110 came into service. However, the legacy of the Shahab-1 cannot be overstated. It was the bridge from dependency to autonomy, from vulnerability to deterrence. By adopting, rebranding, and eventually modifying this missile, Iran established the foundation for what is today one of the Middle East's most extensive missile arsenals. The Shahab-1 was not just a weapon, it was the seed of an entire strategic doctrine. The Shahab-1, though modest by today's standards, carried technical characteristics that made it a significant weapon for Iran during its early missile era. Built directly on the foundation of the Soviet-designed Scud-B and supplied through North Korea, the Shahab-1 retained almost all of its predecessors' specifications. Yet for Iran, these numbers and features translated into a new strategic capability that had never existed before. The missile is a short-range ballistic missile SRBM, designed for ranges of approximately 285 to 330 kilometers. This meant it could target cities, industrial hubs, or military bases in neighboring countries without needing advanced launch platforms. The missile's Length of about 11.2 meters and diameter of 0.88 meters made it a fairly large system, requiring specialized vehicles for transportation and launch. At launch, the missile weighs around 5,900 to 6,400 kilograms, making it heavy but manageable with mobile launchers, which provided flexibility in deployment. One of the Shahab-1's key features was its payload capacity, which allowed it to carry a warhead weighing close to 985 kilograms. This was significant because such a heavy warhead could deliver devastating explosive power even with limited precision, while most Shahab-1 warheads were high explosive or fragmentation based. Analysts have long noted that the design could potentially be adapted for chemical payloads, though there is no verified evidence of their use in this form. The missile operates with a single-stage, liquid-fueled engine using kerosene and inhibited red-fuming nitric acid IRFNA as propellants. While effective, this fueling system required substantial preparation time, sometimes hours, which exposed the missile to detection and counterattack. Nonetheless, it was a practical solution for Iran's early missile operations. In terms of guidance, the Shahab-1 relies on an inertial navigation system. This system, though reliable in theory, lacks real-time correction and results in a relatively poor circular error. Probable SEP of about 450-500 meters. In practice, this meant the Shahab-1 could not be used effectively against pinpoint military targets, but was more suited for striking large area targets like cities or industrial complexes, where accuracy mattered less than sheer destructive impact. Taken together, the Shahab-1 specifications reveal both its strength and limitations. It was a relatively simple, heavy, reach but came with drawbacks in accuracy and operational flexibility. For Iran in the late 1980s, however, these limitations were far outweighed by the missile's ability to serve as a credible deterrent and a starting point for future advancements. The strategic impact of the Shahab-1 cannot be measured solely in terms of its range, payload, or accuracy. Its true value lay in how it transformed Iran's position in the regional balance of power and reshaped its military doctrine during a period of vulnerability. At a time when Iran was reeling from years of war and international isolation, the Shahab-1 gave the country a new voice in the language of deterrence. During the Iran-Iraq War, Iraq's use of Soviet Scud missiles against Iranian cities was devastating. Tehran, Isfahan, and other population centers suffered under the psychological and physical weight of these attacks. Before the much Shahab-1, Iran had no comparable response. Conventional airstrikes were limited by sanctions and aging aircraft, and artillery lacked the reach to strike deep into Iraqi territory. When Iran acquired and deployed Shahab-1 missiles, it signaled the beginning of a new phase of warfare. For the first time, Iran could retaliate against Iraqi cities, altering the dynamics of the War of the Cities. Even though the Shahab-1 was not accurate enough to strike military targets precisely, its ability to hit large urban centers sent a clear message: Iran could answer fire with fire. Beyond the battlefield, the Shahab-1's presence carried a significant psychological weight. A missile does not have to be perfectly accurate to instill fear. Its mere existence and potential for destruction are enough to deter adversaries. The Shahab-1 introduced this deterrent factor into Iran's military playbook. It allowed Iran to project power beyond its borders and provided a strategic tool for influencing regional rivals. The missile also had a political impact. By fielding Shahab-1, Iran demonstrated that it could overcome isolation and sanctions to acquire advanced technology. This boosted national morale and gave the leadership a symbol of technological and military progress. In the broader Middle East, it signaled that Iran was entering the ranks of states with ballistic missile capabilities, which in turn shifted how neighboring countries and global powers approached Tehran diplomatically and militarily. Most importantly, the Shahab-1 laid the groundwork for Iran's future missile doctrine, which emphasizes deterrence, retaliation, and strategic depth. It was the seed from which the Shahab-2, Shahab-3, and more modern systems grew. Its strategic legacy is not in how many were launched or how accurate they were, but in how it set Iran on a path toward becoming a regional missile power. The story of the Shahab-1 is more than the story of a single missile. It is the story of a nation determined to shift from vulnerability to deterrence. Born in the crucible of the Iran-Iraq War, the Shahab-1 emerged as Iran's first step into the world of ballistic missiles. Its foundational role gave Iran not only a retaliatory tool, but also the confidence and technical experience needed to build an indigenous missile program. From its technical specifications, we see a system that was heavy, simple, and limited in accuracy, but capable of delivering devastating payloads. Its liquid-fueled engine demanded time and preparation.